Hello and welcome to Conversations with Kona. I'm Kona with Lighthouse News and Notes. It is April 19th, 2025, and I am here with one of my favorite people, Donna D'Angelo, with the Institute of Christ Consciousness. She has a fabulous presentation for us today on Adam and Eve and the garden culture. So without further introduction, let me go ahead and bring in Donna. With the Institute of Christ Consciousness, there's her email. And here is Donna. Thank you so much for being here today, Donna. I can't wait to hear this presentation and all that you have for us and those in our audience and who will be joining us at some point in the future from the recording.
Thank you, Kona. Looking forward to it now. Would you like to start the PowerPoint?
Sure, we're going to dive right in. Donna has a PowerPoint for us, and we're going to start there, and you will be getting this with the recording later on. So
Yeah,
here you go.
Leave the opening slide up there, yeah. I guess I have to repin you again, Kona, because I'm not going to be able to read the PowerPoint. There we go. Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here. These webcasts have a theme called Exploring Human-Divine Relationships. And the reason I selected this topic is because we are now in a phase of planetary rehabilitation from the ways of the past where our planet got off course in its evolution to a higher divine heavenly culture. In today's presentation, we'll be exploring the garden culture of Adam and Eve and going into a little bit of detail of their story of who they are and what their purpose is for being here on this planet. I teach from the revelatory text of the Urantia Book, and this is a very vast revelation that encompasses a wide variety of information regarding who God is, what God's purpose is for us, who we are in relationship to our place on the planet. And it's divided into 4 parts, with part 3 being the history of our planet, especially our ancient history. And part of that ancient history includes the story of Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden. And for those of you listening who may not be familiar with the perspective of the Urantia Book, the story of Adam and Eve vastly differs from the biblical account of the creation story. Personally, for me, when I was first introduced to the Urantia Book many years ago and read the story of Adam and Eve from their perspective, I concluded that it had to be true because it made too much sense. And some of the theology that I had been raised in the Christian church about the creation story and Adam and Eve didn't ring true, but this account did. And so in doing today's presentation, especially of those of you who may be new to the Urantia revelation, this information may be a little shocking. But it's all good, and it's all designed to help us orient to the fact that we are living on a planet where we have access to wonderful heavenly helpers who are collaborating with us now to feed us with the information we need at the human end to make the changes on the planet that will be providing us a much better social culture. So let's dive into the slideshow, and here's the first one. Who are Adam and Eve? Adam and Eve are divine beings who originate from higher dimensions. They came to our world approximately 1,500 years ago, to help primitive indigenous humans cultivate a social order based on principles of peace, harmony, cooperation, equality, and justice. Their mission is to teach humans principles and ideals of the divine ways of life based upon universal law. Since they are divine, their bodies are eternal and contain a quality of DNA that you might consider perfect and divine, which they share with us through their progeny mating with humans over a long period of time to bring human DNA up to higher levels of spirituality. Now, this is a very big mission they have when they come to a planet, and they're designed to be here for a very long period of time, thousands and thousands and thousands of years. They create a family of very high frequency light beings in physical form who are then designed to mate with the humans to bring their higher DNA into human nature, to upstep the indigenous human population with a greater sense of spirituality. And some of the qualities within that higher DNA is a ability to be more harmonious and cooperative. Indigenous humans tend to be very warlike, very competitive, very antagonistic. Their DNA is part of the divine plan to just smooth out all those human rough edges, you might call it, and to bring us into a higher spiritual nature. And so their plan to create this race of children designed to mate with the humans is something that occurs over a very long period of time. Let's go to the next slide. Their physicality is lovely, and their relationship represents the template for male-female balance. They are complemental in nature, in mind and body. They are harmonious, cooperative, and extremely loving and compassionate. So insofar as they create the template for the balance between men and women, we're living in a culture that has been primarily dominated by the male energy. And for them, they don't have that same type of antagonistic relationship dynamic between the two of them. Men and women were designed to cooperate together. Men and women have different functions, but when they cooperate together, that synergy of function is something that is based on a higher divine pattern, which then fosters humans to be more balanced in their masculine and feminine traits. So they create children based upon the spiritual template of the nuclear family, two parents creating their children, male and female. Their pattern or their family model replicates the social culture of the planet to help humanity build a strong social foundation based upon their divine design. So the nuclear family is what you might call the fabric of our social institution, because in the family, this is where children learn how to set aside their own egos and start learning how to cooperate with one another. And so when children are raised in healthy, loving relationships and their self-worth is augmented to the point where they are acting as very important contributors to the family foundation, this can extrapolate out into the culture where people are working more cooperatively and harmoniously with one another. And these are some of the early lessons that happen within the nuclear family. And I'm talking about at the divine, what you might call the perfect level. Unfortunately, on our planet, we don't have a lot of those models, but there is enough of understanding that the family is the social fabric of the society. Okay, we can go to the next one. Here's another aspect of them. They love and respect the natural world. They know all the flora and fauna of the plants and the animals. They can communicate with the animals and the plants. They know all of the healing properties of the natural world, and they can teach humanity how to connect with the natural intelligence of the planet. So we are in a phase of getting a lot of this information restored back to us. We have abused our beautiful planet in so many ways, and we are now living in a lot of what you might call a toxic environment. Our water, our land, our air have all been highly polluted. And yet Adam and Eve are here to help us remember that nature should be honored and respected, and that nature has a way of communicating with us so that we are using the energies of the natural world the way it was originally designed. And Adam and Eve, because they know all of the healing biochemicals of all the planet, they are the teachers for the indigenous population to know these beautiful healing properties. So, for example, in a lot of the indigenous cultures who are very close to the land and have been able to ascertain or intuit the healing properties of the plants, that is a legacy from Adam and Eve from thousands and thousands of years ago. So there are remnants of that on the planet. Some cultures are better versed in understanding this principle, but some other cultures need a little bit of changing their perspective, especially the way in which we operate in the Western culture. Okay, next slide. And so what is the garden culture? So Adam and Eve teach primitive human the higher ways of universe function. And as I said, they hail from a higher dimensional planet called Edentia, and they build their Garden of Eden here to become a world cultural center to draw humans to learn the divine universe ways of life. So that was the original purpose of the Garden of Eden. And at the time the Garden of Eden was constructed, Adam and Eve were not the only humans, and they are not the first humans. They came to this world at a time when there were many indigenous races, and the what you might call the spiritual administration of our planet saw that we needed to bring about this higher culture. And so they commissioned Adam and Eve to leave their home and to come to our world to start teaching us those higher ways of life. Okay, next point. So they teach humans many aspects of a divine order: marriage and family life, education of children, cultivating positive social relationships, health and well-being, spiritual knowledge, building a social order based on spiritual principles. Now, I'm speaking very generally here, but there is information in the Urantia book, and I have resources at the end that talk about exactly what they are here to do. But if you consider that indigenous primitive humans who were created roughly or began to appear roughly about 1 million years ago, they are rough, what you might call vessels of clay, and they are responding to the very rugged environment of the natural world around them. And so they don't have access to all of that higher spiritual information they need. And so over a period of time, as evolution progressed, it was deemed appropriate from the spiritual administration to bring forth this beautiful divine pair to mate with the humans through their progeny to create more spiritual DNA within us. And I'm going to make one more point and then I'll stop for questions. They foster human evolution to be genetically upstepped by their DNA being gradually introduced into human genetics from their children who mate with the humans to pass along their higher genetic properties. And then I think there's one more point on this one. They also teach harnessing and communication with the natural energies of the planet for humans to perceive its intelligence. Since they are able to communicate with the natural world, they also teach us how to do that within the animal and other natural worlds of the planet life. So I'm just going to stop here and ask if there's any questions for those who may be new to this information, or anybody who wants to also have a question.
A lot of great information. Anybody have questions about the presentation so far? Is this new information to any of you? Just kind of wave your hand at me. All right, so it is a little bit new to one of our guests here, Donna. So just kind of you mentioned a few things. We'll take a minute to talk about that for this being new, quite different from the traditional Adam and Eve story. We're talking about folks that are coming, I call Adam and Eve folks that are coming from another planet, from another place in time, literally as part of a divine plan to bring humanity and all of the indigenous cultures that have evolved over time to a higher place. Now I know had read a little bit of research where it seems like there's this point somewhere around 200 or 250,000 years ago that there was an upstep then, but you're saying now that Adam and Eve came about 37,500 years ago, and then there was another upstep then, which would bring a change in our culture and our societies. So we're getting some divine input and we're not left stranded on a planet even under the rebellion circumstances, which I think is really good news. It's just a very different story. However, it seems to parallel a lot that has been written, let's say in the last 20, 40, 60 years, where people have done the archaeology. They're like, wow, there was something really different about humanity right here. There's an upgrade. There's something happened. And then what we have is the Urantia book giving us a little bit of that backstory, and you're sharing that with us today.
Exactly. And because the perspective of the Urantia book is so vast, I can only talk about it in smaller snippets, especially regarding this subject of the webcast, exploring human-divine relationships. The perspective of the Urantia book goes into great detail, talking about how material worlds, such as our planet, are shepherded by divine beings to reach a higher social culture where it would be as if we were living heaven on earth. That is the objective for the evolutionary worlds and the human souls who live on it, to participate in this great cultivation of this higher social order. It takes thousands of years for this to develop to its culmination. The Urantia book lays out the pathway of how that occurs on a planet. Our planet is different because we had a deviation from the divine plan of evolution many thousands years ago. Kona, you just mentioned the number 200,000 years ago, and that's how long it was. And because of that deviation, our regular evolution to a higher social order stopped. And it's been limping along for many thousands of years. But there was an upgrade in around 37,500 years ago with Adam and Eve coming here to act as a compensatory plan to give humanity more of the divine DNA that it needs, so that the indigenous population would gradually outgrow some of those very primitive, warlike, ego-centered dynamics and move more into being more socially harmonious and loving and cooperative with the divine plans of evolution. So where we are now is part of a major effort to get this planet back to its divine plan of evolution and to help humanity understand who we are in our place in the divine plan of all life. And there's so much information that has to come back to us, that Adam and Eve play a major role in this return to the divine plan. And yet, because of the overarching theology of the creation story, it's very difficult for people to kind of grasp this at first, because it's like polar opposites. And like I said, when I first encountered this Adam and Eve story, I concluded that it had to be true because it just made too much sense and it answered so many questions. So if anyone doesn't have a question, we can go back to the slideshow and continue on with the presentation.
Sure. The only last point that I would make is that our planet is not alone, that there's not just one Adam and Eve. And so, might be good news to know that this evolutionary process happens across all of the planets, across all of the galaxy. And, it's just part of the divine order. And that's encouraging to me to know, that there is a plan way out in the universe. All right. So I'll stop talking and let you continue on. Here we go back to the presentation. Go ahead, Donna.
So here we are at the phase of what happened to their culture. Why don't we know more about it now? So prior to their arrival on the planet participated in a deviation of the divine plans of planetary evolution. Their coming to the planet was meant to support the planet to get back on the divine plan of evolution from a very primitive culture to reflect the divine orders of life at a higher levels of consciousness. They were thwarted in their mandate to build the garden culture by a devious plan to accelerate their ways on the planet for human, social, and spiritual development. Now, I want to make a point here because when a planet is given a divine plan, there is a spiritual administrator who is responsible for shepherding the indigenous population and the whole planet into a higher social order. Unfortunately, that spiritual administrator decided he didn't like the divine plan of evolution and decided to develop his own. And so we've been living in this very deviant social culture where the ways and the divine laws of life have been largely misunderstood and misapplied. So what is happening now, and can we just go back to the slide there, please? So Adam and Eve wanted to see if they could speed up how their plan could operate better in helping humanity get more of the divine DNA so that we would become more loving, more spiritually conscious, more cooperative with one another. And unfortunately, they made a very serious misstep. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details because that account is very well presented in the Urantia book, and I'll have the links at the end of the presentation. Okay, next point. When they deviated from the divine mandate, they lost their eternal status and became like humans, but they lived very long lives to continue to develop their social culture. So in the biblical account, there's something called the tree of knowledge. That actually, from the Urantia book perspective, was called the tree of life. And it had a property to it that Adam and Eve ate their fruit that would sustain their eternal nature. Unfortunately, when they deviated from the divine plan, they no longer had access to the tree of life. And so therefore the spiritual nutrition that they needed, they were cut off from that and they lost their divine status. And they and their progeny, some of them were left on the planet to continue to build the culture, but they had a lot of difficulty, and especially they had lost their eternity status, but they lived very long lives. And the Adams and Eves, who are their children, also live very long lives, 500, 600, 700 years. And that is where some of the myths in the Bible come from about these mighty men of old who've lived all these very long lives. It's because of that Adamic DNA that was inserted into the human genome and allowed many of their children and the mated children of Adam and Eve, the human children, to live longer lives. So this is a kind of like a clearing out of some of the mythology from the biblical accounts of why there are so many in the past, those records of people living these long lives, like Methuselah living over 900. He must have had a lot of Adamic DNA in order to let him live that long. Okay, next point. Their Garden of Eden home was destroyed due to their mistake, and they developed a second garden to foster their continuation of their mandate. But they couldn't complete their objectives, and because they eventually did die off, they did leave remnants of their divine DNA for humanity's social and spiritual development, but we did not receive the full complement of their DNA that we should have had in our bodies by now. And had we had that, we would have been more, from a physical nature, we would have been healthier. We would have been much more immune to the pathogens out in the planet, the viruses, the bacteria, those kinds of things. We would be living in what you would call a higher physical state too, where we would be more inclined to pursue things like the arts, creativity, in all areas of life, because they had this incredible aesthetic of joy and love, and they were very artistic. They were very creative. They worked in all the different levels of the arts, and this is where we get some of that inheritance. And some of our cultures have more of that than some of the other human races. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. So now, what is being brought back to us presently? So we are now in a phase of planetary rehabilitation. There are two divine beings who you might consider to be our mom and dad, spirit mom and dad, who are now bringing us a compensatory plan of rehabilitation to help us overcome the deficits of how we deviated from the divine plan of evolution. Adam and Eve are back on the planet, but in spirit form, and they're at a higher level of frequency, and they communicate with the humans through mind, telepathy, to convey the information we need to learn from their garden culture to replicate their model for greater social institutional reform. We are in the very early stages of this now, and there are people who are being contacted by Adam and Eve to receive a wide variety of information. People who are being impressed with information to connect with the natural world and learn its divine intelligence. People who are being opened up to different value systems for changes in our social institutions, who are encouraging people to look at the values within our social institutions. This is all part of Adam and Eve's information coming back to us. And so there's so many benefits to be gained in communicating with them, and we'll be doing a meditation today to help you kind of acclimate to who they are. But during communications, they provide a wide variety of information, and they start to, and this is very hard to explain, but what they do is they are able to come into our bodies and start to graft their DNA design into our genetic composition. And so what happens is, the way I've seen it in the healing work that I do, is that their DNA encoding contains tremendous amounts of information that we should have had by now, but were lost because of the way the planet evolved. And so that information spirals in at a high energetic level and frequency and starts to open up the human DNA strand at an etheric level and starts to imprint its information. and it has an ability to communicate with the human DNA, but that happens over a series of time. It is not what you might call an immediate transfer of information. There's a lot involved in this process. It's very complex, but it's available to us to help our bodies get stronger and healthier so we can remain here on the planet and participate in this massive rehabilitation plan. So one of the things they're teaching us now in communicating with them, as I said, to communicate with the natural world, to get back to understand what the natural world wants to teach us. They want us to access the information in the animal, vegetable, mineral, and other levels of planetary life. And it's fun to communicate with them and to open your mind to ask those questions. What do I need to learn? And if you have interests about how to heal yourself or how to communicate with the plants and to learn the healing properties, you can ask them to come in and share their information with you because they love you and they want to help you become healthier and a feeling of well-being, like to be really feel happy and joyful in your body. So they also contain a higher frequency of light. It's a violet light that calibrates the human mind. And again, this is part of the what you might call human equipment capacity that we do have within us, but has gotten cut off or disconnected because of that deviation from the divine plan of evolution. Now, I have many years of experience in understanding what happened with that deviation, but it's such a big story to go into that it's not possible to do that in any one particular webcast. It would require a longer amount of time. But the good news is we're getting back on track, and there is a divine dispensation now to bring us back to the inheritance that we should have already developed by now. And so the next slide is, and this is the last one of the presentation, how do we tap into their inheritance for us? So we do this by going into meditation and they make contact within the inner circuits of human thought. So when you think of thought, that's not just your own thought. Sometimes it's coming from a higher spiritual person who's helping you open up to higher ways. And they also come in to help you feel more trusting and confident in their divine natures and the help that they can provide. So you can call upon them in your meditation and ask them to, what you might call, calibrate you to their divine design, because this is done through a series of collaborations where their energies are operating at a very high vibrational level. And if the human vibration is down here, what's happening is it's like a tuning fork principle, and it's starting to bring you up into that a higher vibrational frequency where the healing occurs. Now, like I said, this doesn't happen overnight, but the more you connect with them and the more they can infuse you with the components of their beings, including their DNA, then it becomes a lot easier for you to feel their natures and have a confidence that something is indeed changing in you. Okay, next point. So like I said, just ask for their divine DNA to integrate into your body, open to receive what is essentially grafting of their information upon your genetic code, and just relax, because this is a gift. And over time, you will begin to understand and feel a lot better in your body and start to have more impetus to expand into your spiritual growth. Okay. So sit with them and tell them what you're interested in, learn of the intelligence of the natural world. And I always recommend that you have a journal handy to record the thoughts you perceive. And then also, if you feel like you're out of balance with your human male, female energies, ask them to pattern your human nature, on their divine inheritance, so you become more balanced in your own masculine, feminine dynamics. And you have a right to do this, and also ask for their peace and harmony and other attributes of their divinity to communicate into your mind and body. Because this is where they start the downloads, the divine downloads that we have a right to receive. And the more you open to them, it's like you're giving your body and your mind that permission to open up to receive this. So the last slide is just the resources page, and I have included the 5 papers from the Urantia book where you can get more information about Adam and Eve. The first paper, 51, talks about who the planetary Adams and Eves are at a higher dimensional level, where they originally hail from, the world called Edentia. Paper 73, The Garden of Eden, talks about how the Garden of Eden was constructed and being made ready for Adam and Eve to come into the planet. Paper 74 talks about when they first came here and their perusal of the garden, which started a lot of our religious and social traditions. Paper 75 goes into what happened to them and how they deviated from the divine plan. And then the last one, paper 76, The Second Garden of Eden, what happened to them and their progeny after they left the original Garden of Eden and created the second garden. And the papers after that talk about, which is very fascinating, how the indigenous races were also influenced by the garden culture. So this is all part of our hidden history that, very few people know about unless you really explore this in the Urantia book. But there are also people who are now being imprinted or impressed with this information about some of the culture that we lost. And so this is all part of the divine design to get us back on track. So it's really a wonderful thing that we're in this period now where all of our divine inheritance is being brought back to us if we want it, and if we step up and ask for it and learn the principles of what we need as humans so we can cooperate with that and help others understand what is happening on the planet as well. So I'm going to stop here now, and we're going to go into a meditation with Adam and Eve in a few minutes. But any comments or questions? Anything I can clarify?
Yes, we have a comment from one of our participants, Robert, here, and this is a very nuanced way to express this. So what I'm seeing, and I'm going to share with everybody, what I'm seeing from Robert is an old paradigm. What you're giving us is a new paradigm. So listen very carefully to this comment, and then if you'll parse out the differences between the old paradigm and the new paradigm. He writes, their creator, in reference to Adam and Eve in the fall, their creator took away their privileges to live eternity after siding with the creator's adversary and eating of that tree of life, knowledge of good and evil. So we see the old paradigm. If you could parse that out and tell us and Robert the difference between what the story is that you are sharing it from his experience.
I'm only going to speak from my experience, but to me, the biblical account is highly mythological and contains remnants of the original story. 37,500 years ago is a long time for a story to come through in its purest form. Adam and Eve did lose their eternal status because they did deviate from the divine plan, but it didn't have anything to do with eating of the tree of good and evil. What they did was they thought they were doing good, but unfortunately, they didn't understand the implications of the decisions they made to deviate from the divine plan, so they evil. And the biblical, I think it's a quote, in the days when you combine evil, you will surely die. And that's when they lost their immortal status. It's not that they did something intentionally evil. It's just that they were living on a planet that was so primitive and barbaric. And here are divine beings looking out on this world culture with these primitive humans who are warlike and dirty and didn't understand the principles of like hygiene and cooperation. And so they were very flummoxed, really, about how to proceed with their divine plan of creating this race of children that would be so spiritually vibrant that could go out and mate with the indigenous population and teach them those ways. That plan was supposed to take thousands of years. They wanted to speed it up, especially Eve. And Eve made a very serious judgmental error in what she agreed to do to foster the plan. You can read about it in the Urantia book, and I highly recommend if you're interested in this. This is such a fascinating story. I mean, it's so compelling that I think it'll really open one's eyes to how things really function on an evolutionary world. The biblical account contains references, but a lot of them are metaphorical and even mythical. So I would just encourage you to take this into your heart and ask for the truth. Hey, who, Adam and Eve, who are you? What do you want to show me? Um, Everyone has to make his and her mind up about what is truthful and what is coming from what you might call traditions going back thousands of years, where things lose their, their truthful interpretation because there's so many people then get in the mix and add their own belief systems to it. So when the Bible was written, what was it, maybe 5,000 years ago? I mean, there's a long span where a lot of information was lost. And so there are all these threads that are now coming back to life, and people are getting more information about the fact that, there was some type of genetic upstepping for humanity. But until you read the Urantia Book account, where it's really discussed pretty clearly, it's hard to understand who those people were and what was the reason for that. And I hope that answers your question.
I think that's very helpful. I think the other nuanced piece is that they had permission to eat from the tree of life. And that
Oh,
is very different from the biblical account where they were forbidden to eat from the tree of life, when actually that was what sustained them as divine beings. And that's an important nuance there too, is, they get a lot of flack for having eaten something that they shouldn't have, and really that was what sustained them.
yeah, I don't know why it was called the Tree of Knowledge, but in the Urantia Book account, the Tree of Life came from the world where they originated, Densha, as a spiritual nutrition for their particular bodies, because even though they were human, they were divine, and they had a little extra something that we don't have in our DNA, which we were supposed to get. And that part of their human composition was sustained by the energies of the tree of life. But that reference to, in the days you combine good and evil, you shall surely die. So they did that. They did something that was supposed to not have happened. And even though they didn't have an evil intent, it was a deviation of the divine plan. And that was when, and they also talk about in the Bible, the voice of God. Well, in the Urantia book, there was actually an angel who spoke to them, that they've deviated from the divine plan. So there's remnants from the original Garden of Eden culture and story in the Bible, but I say to you, do your own comparison, see which one resonates the most.
Of course. That's why we're given this beautiful mind here and heart and spirit to purse these things out and read and compare. Thank you so much for this presentation, Don. I know you're eager to lead our audience in the meditation. So, Robert, if you have any further questions or comments, please put them in the chat and we can possibly discuss them with you at a later time. All right, Donna, go ahead.
I always like to do a presentation followed up with a meditation because the information comes in at an intellectual level, but really what we need now in this particular phase of our planetary evolution is to get that higher spiritual energy and to incorporate that not only into our thoughts, but into our bodies, and to really soak into the gift of divine grace that is available to us through this wonderful pair of Adam and Eve, who are now here on the planet in a glorified spiritual form to share their magnificent energies with them. And I hope that you will feel them in you, because it is so loving and even and deeply peaceful, deeply healing in the body. And when you let that come in and just put aside any of your questions, your mental agitation and mental current, and just say, I need the divine DNA that I was promised. This is a gift. This is part of our human divine inheritance. We don't have to struggle so much in our bodies, and let that come in. Now, I cannot make any promises of how this is going to come into you or how it's going to play out. It's just a presentation to help you know that you have access to this and to step up and to receive the gift of grace that is your divine inheritance to make you into the best version of yourself. And I promise you that as you tap into this, especially on a regular basis, you will begin to feel it more, and it will lead you into a much more peaceful demeanor and just assurance that whatever we're going through right now of a difficulty on this planet is leading to a magnificent, absolutely wonderful planetary outcome in future. Okay. All righty. So just become comfortable where you are in your seat. Close your eyes and take a few relaxing breaths. And just focus your attention down into your heart center. Mother, Father, God, thank you for the gift of Adam and Eve back on our world. We ask for our minds to be open to their presence, for our bodies to be calibrated to their divine DNA deep within us, that the record of their who they are and why they were here can come back into us. We all have a little bit of their DNA within us, and we just thank you so much for their ability to augment that within us, to help us feel their divine nature that's so soothing, comforting, nurturing, and sustaining. So as we move through the meditation, we thank you for what is being applied into us now through your grace and mercy. And we thank you so much for restoring our divine inheritance to us. Thank you. As we go through the meditation, I invite you to focus on the words that I will be sharing. This is part of a process in which to receive them. So to begin, just see the words Adam and Eve at your heart, gently pulsing, gently imprinting into your heart. And feel that need to receive more of your divine DNA. You have a right to this, and you can claim this as part of your divine inheritance. And now, if you're willing, invite their presence to go deep into your body. Invite them in, especially into any place where you might be having a physical abnormality or problem. Invite them to come in and bring in their higher frequencies of their violet light and their divine DNA to help you outwork the situation in physical form. Invite their violet light to be as a river of life coursing through your body, helping your body's memory system, the cellular function of your body, remember this beautiful divine inheritance where the body is designed to live in a state of peace and joy so that the body is happy, mobile, vital, vibrant. Just feel that need to soak up this river of life energy flowing from them into you. Ask for the healing compounds in their divine DNA via the river of life to communicate into your body. Know that you can come to them in any moment of your day to receive this beautiful infusion of who they are into you. Part of their divine inheritance in you is to foster feelings of being more peaceful, even natured, being able to have access to higher spiritual information and energy. And so just ask for their divine attributes to start grafting upon your human nature, even though you may not exactly understand the process by which they function. What they want from us and what they need from us is our faith. Faith that they love us and they are trustworthy, and they will infuse you with a quality of energy that is so soothing that you just want to stay and receive, like a baby suckling at its mother's breast. Ah. Feed, feed, feed upon their divine nature and let it grow in your own divine inheritance. Our bodies were designed to be strong, flexible, mobile, and healthy. A state of health is our natural inheritance. Because we live in a planetary culture presently where we have been so bombarded by environmental toxins, the cellular function becomes resistant to the divine sparks of life. However, when you come to Adam and Eve and ask them to bring in the information your body needs to heal itself, trust that they will respond. It does take time for the body to acclimate, but the more you sit with them, especially on a daily basis, their presence will grow in you and what they are feeding you of their divine nature. It is up to you whether or not to invite them to help you. But as you grow more experienced in trusting them, you will notice over time new sensations in your body, new thoughts in your mind about how you can take better care of yourself so that you can sustain your life and your soul purpose here on this planet for a longer period of time. And if you wish, for another few moments, focus on the words genetic repair. In focusing on these words, hold an intention for your body to receive this. You don't necessarily need to know where the repair needs to be conducted because they can see inside your body and know what to provide to you. Your mind and body has access to such a diverse range of information so that your thoughts, your thinking habits become more positive and loving. Your emotions become more peaceful and grounded in a secure sense of who you are as a beloved son and daughter of God. And your bodies receive the information it needs so its natural healing abilities can function more optimally. But remember, it is up to you to take responsibility by going to all the help you have available and ask to receive it. And in this way, you are showing your trust and faith in the divine ways and natures, the presences and information all around you. And the more you do this, the more you will feel your inner authenticity grow and feel that connection of love in who you are to your divine source. As we end the meditation, take a moment to come back. If you need personal assistance, I can help you access Adam and Eve through something similar to a meditation experience like this. It will be very helpful for you to have a guide to help you move through this process. So if you need some additional assistance, please call on me. And as we now return to normal consciousness, I thank you for coming on the presentation and allowing me to guide you in this meditation. Thank you so much. And we now conclude. Okay, everyone, we're done for today. Does anyone have any final comments or questions?
We have a comment. Thank you for this beautiful presentation. Let Father, Mother God bless your work, from Gidrias. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bless you too. All right, then. Well, I just wish everyone a very happy Easter tomorrow. And do focus on Jesus, because I think there will be a lot of spiritual vitality on the planet tomorrow. And it's always yummy energy to get when you connect with him.
And you have a call tomorrow at
Yes.
noon.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And if you haven't received the notice, please email me and I'll get you connected to that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Donna. As a reminder, we have been with Donna D'Angelo with the Institute of Christ Consciousness. Her email is donna@institutechristconsciousness.org. I invite you that are in the Zoom room with us to stay after if you want to say a few things and hello to Donna. And thank you again for being here. This production is made possible for Donna's ministry through your generous donations. She and I are both grateful for all of the donations, the consistent donors over many decades of her work. If you would like to make a donation, please go to her website, institutechristconsciousness.org, to the donations page, and feel free to make your donation of any amount there. Thank you again, and have a blessed Easter Sunday. See you next time.
Loved everybody.